Hi, I'm Veronica Switek with Ybor City Development Corporation, and I'd like to welcome you to Ybor Flavors. Ybor Flavors is a new show showcasing Ybor City, which is Tampa's National Historic Landmark District. Today, we're going to learn a little bit more about Ybor City, and to show us around Ybor, I'm going to introduce Bob, one of the ambassadors. Bob, how are you?
Just fine. How are you doing today?
Great. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
We'd like to learn a little bit more about Ybor City, and I thought you would be the perfect person.
Well, that's great. What would you like to see?
Well, let's start off with the history.
There's so much of it. Come on this way.
Great. So Bob, who is this that we have here?
Well, let me explain to you. This is Mr. Vincent Martinez Ybor. He's the founder of Ybor City.
Wow, famous man.
Yes, he is. Very smart man, very intelligent, and very loved.
And so tell me, how did he find Ybor City?
Oh, by accident, actually. A friend of his brought him into Ybor City. He fell in love with our harbor. He fell in love with our railways. And City of Tampa gave him an option he could not refuse.
What was that?
It was 40 acres of land for $9,000. And his buddy Gutierrez gave him $4,000, and he went into business.
And that's how Ybor City was born?
That's basically how it started, with a vision. He came up, he made his factory, and as his factory was made and the city grew from 700 to 15,000, then it was named after him, and he became the founder of Ybor City.
You talk about factory. What type of factory was this, Bob?
Cigar factory.
Ah, I've heard about the cigars.
That's what Tampa's all known about, is the cigars. At one time, we had 257 cigar factories, and right now we approximately have about 126.
That's incredible. Well, let's go on to our next stop.
Fantastic. This way.
So, Bob, what do we have here?
Well, didn't I tell you needed your passport?
My passport?
Yeah, we're going into Cuba.
Here?
Here.
Let's go. What do you mean this is owned by Cuba, Bob?
Well, to start off with, these used to be Pedrosa's families. It was their home. They lived here. And when the home burned, before it burned actually, Mrs. Pedrosa donated it to Cuba.
And who do we have here?
And this is Jose Martin.
And who is Jose Martin?
Well, he was Cuba's liberator, and he was a poet, a lawyer, and man of justice, the whole 9 yards. He was the greatest thing that ever came out of Cuba during that era. When he would come to Tampa, he would stay here in Pedrosa's home. Now, they loved him. He was like family to them. And when he stayed here, they tasted his food and they tasted his drinks to make sure there was no poison in it. Mr. Pedrosa died first. Then Mrs. Pedrosa naturally got sick when he died. She moved in with her sister, but the house burned.
The house was here?
The house that was here burned to the ground. They could not do anything because they did not have the funds to rebuild it. So what she did, the second best thing, was donate the property to Cuba. That's how this became Cuba soil.
And it's still Cuban soil?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
And what about these 6 plots that we have surrounding us?
As story goes, we cannot document it, all right? I don't have it on paper. But the families of different friends here went to Cuba and came back with sand in their purses, suitcases, bags from the 6 different provinces imported in here. That's why you got Havana, you got Camagüey, Del Rio, Matanza. You've got them all here. Sand was poured, and that's the history to it.
That is fascinating. Where are we off to next?
Good secret. Let me show you.
Let's go. Bob, isn't there a historic hotel that some very famous people used to stay at here in Ybor City?
You just ruined my surprise. This was it.
This is it? This
Yes.
is the hotel?
Yes, ma'am.
Where are we at?
We are now on the corner of 14th and 9th. And this is El Pasaje Hotel.
El Pasaje Hotel. What an unusual word. What does that mean?
Actually, El Pasaje means the passage. The passage from Cuba to the Central Earth, or to the civilized country.
And this being a hotel, that makes complete sense.
Yes, it does. One thing a lot of people don't realize, but we have President Grover Cleveland, General Woods, Teddy Roosevelt, Winston Churchill, all of these gentlemen spend time here. And all of the governors of the state of Florida were fed here.
In this hotel, the El Pasaje?
Yes, ma'am.
That's amazing. All here in Ybor City.
And to top it, this happens to be the second hotel of its kind.
It's a duplicate of one from Havana, Cuba.
Wow. It's amazing the history that Ybor City has.
Yes, it is.
For more information about the Ybor City Ambassadors, please contact the Ybor City Development Corporation. Bob, thank you so much for giving us a tour of Ybor City.
It was my pleasure.
Absolutely, thank you. I've worked up an appetite. What is this that we have here?
This is La Tropicana. It's a Cuban restaurant, and it is the oldest Cuban restaurant in Ybor City.
Well, great. I'd love a Cuban sandwich. Do they have them?
They sure do.
Well, great. Let's go on in. La Tropicana is one of the oldest Cuban restaurants in Ybor City. It was started by the Licata and Mendendez families in 1963. Today, the restaurant is owned and operated by the second generation. We're here to hear about a Cuban sandwich and about your history.
Well, we just happen to know a little bit about that. Well, La Tropicana is a part of Ybor City. It was a merger of two families, and we've been here ever since. This is our second generation. We're trying to keep that history going, and we're very proud of that. And our specialty just happens to be a Cuban sandwich, so you're in the right spot. Basically, the Cuban sandwich is Cuban bread, the most important thing. And that is unique to Ybor City because people try to make that all over the country, all over Florida, and it's the Tampa water. There's something about it. There's a secret element in it.
And what do we have here?
Well, that is a palm leaf that when it's made in the very, very beginning, it's put on there and it's spread out, and that gives it the texture. Otherwise, it would come out really, really smooth, and that gives it that little flair to the bread.
I've always wondered about that.
Yeah, it's just not so much for flavor; it's more for aesthetic value.
Wow.
But it makes it wonderful. It's another secret thing that we just don't know why it does it, but it does it. The other main ingredients of a Cuban sandwich are ham, roast pork, salami, and Swiss cheese. And what makes the Cuban sandwich unique to Ybor City is because what makes up Ybor City is the Spanish culture, the Cuban culture, and an Italian culture.
And which one is which?
Well, these are all a merger again of those cultures. The ham is mainly like from the Spanish culture. The pork, more of a Cuban culture. And then the salami and Swiss cheese, the Italians threw in there, so that everybody would have a little say in our Cuban sandwich.
Make everybody happy.
Right. In reality, it should be called the Ybor sandwich because it really truly is unique to Ybor City. The bread, an interesting fact, the bread was created, back in for the Rough Riders, and so that they could have something that they could carry into Cuba, into battle when they were fighting in Cuba, and that's why they called it Cuban bread.
Now, the Rough Riders had a huge history in Ybor City.
They do, excuse me, they do. Well, again, that's another part of our culture, and that's why the sandwich truly is unique to Ybor City.
Right.
And then during the Depression era, people needed to spread out the food and their sources, and that's why the bread became a little bit elongated because they were just trying to get more from the bread. But all the other elements stayed the same.
So how do you make one of these famous Cuban sandwiches?
Well, the first thing we got to do is put on ham.
Now, what about the dressing or mayonnaise?
Well, nowadays people ask for mayonnaise, mustard, lettuce, tomato, and pickles. We even have like a mustard mayonnaise mix, which we call the Ybor mix. But in the old days, it was just mustard and pickles is the traditional way.
And why is that?
Well, for several really two reasons. One was that lettuce and tomato was a high commodity at that time. But the main reason is when they're working in the cigar factories, it was hot, and mayonnaise and lettuce and tomato could spoil, and they didn't have the refrigeration and the little coolers and the igloos that we have today. So that's the main reason for that. And that is just carried over. And so when people come in, they'll go, I want a Cuban sandwich traditional, and that's the way they get it, is mustard and pickles.
Great.
But now most people want the whole works, so everything on it, so that's what we provide. So the first step on the Cuban sandwich is the ham. And then we put a little roast pork. And the Cuban sandwich is not if you want to compare it to a big giant deli sandwich, it was made to be a thinner sandwich. So it's not good to be piling, some places might put bologna and try to make it real thick, but that's not the way to make a Cuban sandwich. It should have these 4 elements on it, but not, you know, overabundance, because you want to be able to taste each one in the bread. You don't want it to be all meat.
Now, I heard that it was the cigar makers that actually were eating the Cuban sandwiches.
Right, because that's how kind of Ybor City, all the people came here, working class people come here to make the cigars, and that's where the mixture of all the people they recruited to come into the cigar factories, and they're like, you know, hey, let's, you know, some people brought in a ham, and, you know, so they all made this Cuban sandwich into one thing, and that's how it became unique to Ybor City.
So we have the 3 layers of meat.
We have 3 layers of meat, and then we put on the cheese, and then from there we could put pickles, which I have. I don't mean to leave you.
Now, what if you don't like pickles? Do you have to
Then
have pickles?
pickles, I say no pickles.
We'll put the pickles on.
A Cuban sandwich is how you really want it. You know, I mean, everything evolves over time, and tradition is good, and we try to keep that. But you also have to change with times, and that's why, you know, pickles. If you want pickles, you don't want pickles. You're not a non-Cuban sandwich eater if you don't eat it mustard and pickles only.
Talking about tradition, what year did the Cuban sandwich date back to when you talk about Ybor City?
I don't know the exact year, but you're going into the beginnings of Ybor, you know, the early
1900s, 1800s?
Right. The late 1800s, you know, the formation of the city. So with the city became, you know, people have to eat and work, and that's kind of how this became created.
So what's next?
Then after that, we have, I got only baby tomatoes today. We put a little tomato.
A little tomato, it looks yummy.
Yeah, tomato, some say tomato. Yes. And then we put a little lettuce. And I like to put like a whole slice of lettuce on there rather than a little, people have the chopped up type, because that's the way they used to do it in the old days.
Beautiful.
So I try to keep
not as
that.
messy.
And it's not as messy as well. And then from there, we have mustard and mayonnaise. But the most popular is what we have is a mustard and mayonnaise mix we call the Ybor mix.
The Ybor mix?
And that is over here, hidden.
I'm getting hungry.
You want to put too much, too little. Some people want a whole bunch, some people want a lot. But that's the Ybor mix with the mustard mayonnaise mix. You put it on there. You got it just like that. And the best way to slice it, some people will go, oh, let's slice it. No, 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 no. That's not the way to do it. The best way to do it is at an angle.
And why is that?
It's just a neater way to eat it as well. You know, but it's just the way it's always. Sometimes I don't ask questions. I just do it because that's the way they always used to do it, and that's how I was taught. So, and it just gives it that better way to eat it.
So do I get to taste a bite?
Absolutely. I would love for you to taste a bite. I'm going to get you a basket, a little paper. We have only the fanciest plates here at Tropicana.
Wow, this looks wonderful. A famous Cuban sandwich. Ray, thank you very, very much.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
And I'm going to try to eat this now.
All right, go for it.
Ray, delicious.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. One way to describe Ybor City is fun, and we have many fun festivals in Ybor City, including the Outback Bowl Parade. Today it's New Year's Eve, and here we are in our historic district, and we are with John Smith with the Tampa Electric Company. How you doing, John?
Hi, good. Thank you for having me.
Great. I understand Tico has been a sponsor of the Outback Bowl for many years. Tell us a little bit of the history.
Well, Tampa Electric's been involved with the communities of the Tampa Electric service area for over 100 years, and we've been a sponsor of the Outback Bowl Parade for over 10 years. And it just goes along with the philosophy of Tampa Electric being involved with the communities.
And I see that you're on your float that you have throughout the other parades in Ybor City. Who gets to go on the float this year?
Well, this year we're having a combination like we do on all of the Outback Bowl parades. We bring the two cheerleaders of the two teams together, and for the first time and maybe only time, they're very friendly to each other. as opposed to the game tomorrow morning. So we host both cheerleader teams on our float, and it's one united front throwing beads to all of our guests and customers.
So John, let me get this right. You have both teams, the cheerleaders, you have the Wisconsin Badgers and the Tennessee Volunteers on one float.
On one float, and everybody's one big happy family.
Wow.
Yeah.
Getting ready for the big game tomorrow.
It is, it is.
And tell me a little bit about this Outback Bowl. How many dollars does it bring to Tampa?
From what I understand, since it started in 1986, it's brought Tampa area over $500 million into the Tampa area, aside from just the countless millions of dollars of international and domestic publicity that it brings. So it's really good.
And let me ask you one last question. What team are you cheering for tomorrow?
I cheer for Wisconsin and Tennessee equally.
Good answer. John, Happy New Year's, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Jim McVeigh from the Outback Bowl. Thanks for joining us, Jim. How are you?
Thank you for having us. Thank you for allowing all of our friends from Tennessee and Wisconsin to be in Ybor City for one of our biggest events each year. So we're really excited about this.
Jim, how are you involved with the Outback Bowl?
I am the president and CEO. I've been with the Bowl 20 years now.
Wow.
We have a full-time staff of 5. Everybody's been with us 17 years or longer. We bring in some temporary people around the game just because we're so busy with events and activities and public relations concerns. But I've been in sports a long time, but being with the bowl game really is really a lot of fun. Certainly, as we try to create an economic impact and do very positive things for the Tampa Bay area.
Now, Outback has a legendary name here in Tampa. How about the Outback Bowl? How long has the Outback Bowl been in Tampa?
Well, we actually started 22 years ago. It was the Hall of Fame Bowl. We were the Hall of Fame Bowl for 9 years, and then we were fortunate enough to bring in Outback Steakhouse as our title sponsor. So this is the 13th year with Outback Steakhouse, and you know all the Outback Steakhouse people, and they're just wonderful. These are people that are involved in the community, they're sports interested, they are a part of the growth and development of our community. So these guys thought it would be important to get involved with our bowl game, be the title sponsor, and things have just continued to go up and up and up ever since Chris Sullivan and the guys got involved.
You have to love the gang over at Outback. Tell us about the economic impact that the Outback Bowl has to this area.
Well, one of the really special things about a bowl game is the ability to bring thousands and thousands of visitors from out of market, out of state to our community. When these people come to our area, they're in hotels, car rental agencies using cars, they're out on the streets, retail certainly benefits, nightclubs, restaurants. The economic impact typically for a bowl game like ours, which is a New Year's Day game, is somewhere around $40 million.
Wow.
When you bring 30 or 35 or 40,000 people from out of state to your community and they're spending 3 or 4 nights, I mean, these people come and they're in a good mood with a pocket full of money, they're bringing a lot of dollars, and you can see up and down the streets right here in Ybor City, our fans are having fun and they're spending money, and that's great for our economy.
And lastly, tell us about Ybor City and the parade that we have tonight.
Well, this is our big event each year on New Year's Eve. We have 2,500 high school band members that'll be in our parade tonight, and they're competing to perform in the pregame show. Halftime, all the high school bands will be out on the field, certainly. We have the college bands, we have floats, we have celebrities. This is a really neat way to celebrate the bowl game, and it's open to the community. We want everybody throughout the Tampa Bay area to come out, enjoy the schools, enjoy the colors, enjoy the fun of Ybor City, and this really is the perfect spot. If you look up and down the streets, everybody's smiling, having fun. It really is the cool place to be on New Year's Eve.
Well, there you have it from Jim and the Outback Bowl Committee, Ybor City and the Outback Bowl Parade. Jim, thank you and Happy New Year.
Thank you, and Happy New Year to you.
Ybor City is a lot of fun and has flavors to suit any taste. This is Veronica Switek with YCDC. We'll see you next month and have a great 2008.